Avatar. I know another movie that, gets a lot of hate, the fact that it's pretty much like Dance with Wolves in Space, or, like Fern Gully or Pocahontas or Last Samurai, or any of these other movies where you have kind of like the white colonist character kind of going into kind of like the indigenous society, and then, kind of learning from their culture, and then, joining their culture, and then kind of going against the kind of white colonists characters that they originally for. So I totally understand like why it gets hate in that aspect. But I think James Cameron was really just trying to do like a story that was like simple for the audience, something that they can understand, because this is science fiction. It takes place in another world, takes place in like the 22nd century, and in order for audiences to kind of relate to the characters, you kind of have to have this kind of simple story to kind of explain this kind of bizarre concept of taking your mind and putting into an avatar body, and then having you walk and talk and interact with the Na'vi people. With James Cameron's filmography, is that you can't bet against him. The fact that he had all these innovations with this movie, with like performance capture and with filming in 3D, and then with the simulcam technology where you can put where you have on the monitor, where you have like the live action footage integrated with CG footage, and it's all together. So yeah, in that aspect, I think it's really very innovative. Because beforehand it was like Polar Express was the big kind of motion capture movie, and everything was very much kind of uncanny valley and very robotic. But he had the whole innovation of having like a helmet cam, so that you can have this camera that's focused on the dots that are placed on the actors' faces, so that you can kind of get more authentic motion capture. I know afterwards it was kind of like the whole 3D craze, where instead of filming in 3D, it was kind of like the post-converted 3D, where it's just like, okay, this isn't really all that great, because I remember, seeing Avatar the first time, and it like the 3D kind of created depth rather than things coming towards you, towards camera. I know it had like some scenes of like things coming at you, but it really kind of created depth where you really felt like immersed in the world of Pandora, where you're like in like the forest, or if you're like flying on the Banshees, it really felt like you were like in it. I know he was trying to have more films be like filmed in 3D, but everyone's just like, oh, let's do a cash grab and just post convert everything to 3D, and then everyone will like it. But every 3D movie I saw after that since, it just wasn't good. The fact that people wanted to keep going back to the theater because it was such an immersive experience. The world of Pandora, and people had like the Avatar blues or whatnot, like this depression where they left the theater and they were depressed because Pandora isn't real. They had to go out into the real world and be miserable and stuff. People always say like it didn't leave a legacy after it was released. And which I can totally understand. Like it didn't really have like a lot of like merchandising tie-ins, or comic books or video games and stuff like that. It was really just kind of like a one and done, just because it just took so long for the technology to kind of be available to make it. So I'm sure like James Cameron wasn't really thinking about sequels like at that time to be done like right away, because it was just such a innovation, and no one really knew like what to expect from it. I know James Cameron had this idea back in like 1995 or something. It was going to be his follow-up to Terminator 2, but obviously the technology wasn't available for that, so he had to kind of put it on the shelf, and then did like True Lies and Titanic, and then took a break, and then did some documentaries. But then once Lord of the Rings came out, and then he saw what Peter Jackson was doing with Gollum, and then eventually with King Kong, he said, hey, now's the time to finally do performance capture and really kind of make it more authentic, representation of like what a human being could be in CGI. So he kind of took it back off the shelf and started working on it for like the next couple of years, and then the rest is history. But yeah, I think just overall, it's just a very visually impressive film. Like the world building's great. The visual effects are obviously amazing. James Horner's score is great. Like I listened to that like a whole bunch of times. Even though the story is very, very thin and very cliche, the characters are very, kind of like two-dimensional. Yeah, you can't deny, the visual effects, and the fact that James Cameron like innovated so many things with this film is just undeniable. So yeah, I think in that aspect it was really good. But James Cameron isn't going to win the Oscars for best screenplay, so you kind of have to go into his movies knowing that's probably not going to be the most amazing story, the most amazing dialogue or characters. I think even like back in his other films, even though Terminator I think is like his most original film, not everything's iconic. I know he has like a lot of iconic lines in his movies, like I'll Be Back and Hasta Vista Baby, and I'm the king of the world and all that. I guess as far as plotting and like characterization and character arcs, his later career is kind of lean more towards kind of visual innovation rather than like story, character, and stuff like that. I guess the last thing I wanted to talk about was the social themes that were in the movie as well. I think the fact that he has this kind of environmental environmental message and kind of anti-war message. Yeah, it was really actually surprising because I really thought going into it is going to be more of the cliche, Dance with Wolves, Pocahontas, kind of like what I said before. But the fact that, when the humans are kind of bombing Home Tree and then it kind of like topples over, I felt like I was, getting very emotional about that. And, the fact that they kind of had this kind of subtext of, caring about the environment, like the scene where like the bulldozers are coming in and, knocking down all those trees, that's kind of, where the Fern Gully reference kind of comes in. But the fact that, it's not just, just some kind of fun action adventure, technological, innovative movie, but, the fact that it has these themes, the fact that James Cameron wants to use these movies to continue on those environmental messages, with this one being about saving the rainforest and the next one being about saving the ocean. I respect that idea for sure. Where, you not only want to entertain people and, innovate this technology, but you also want to have these social messages in as well. And the fact that they don't hit you over the head with these messages, the fact that, the characters aren't like talking to the camera and then like having this whole thing, but we need to save the environment, save the rainforest. It kind of just comes through the actions of the characters, and you kind of see the reactions on the characters' faces, and, you're kind of feeling it with them, which James, that was kind of his approach, as kind of have the themes kind of be subtle and not hit you over the head with everything. I'm sure people will feel differently about it, but I'm pretty sure some people will think, oh yeah, those environmental messages are so obvious, but at least like from what I'm watching, it just seems like the characters are just like experiencing it rather than, saying it outright, or, James Cameron coming at the end of the credits and saying this whole message. Like, I think his intention is to kind of just have the characters experience these issues rather than having them like speak about them and, stop the story in its tracks and then just talk about the message. So yeah, I think that's an aspect of these movies that I respect. And yeah, I'm excited to see what he does with the Avatar sequels, and how he can kind of continues with his environmental messages, and how the story kind of builds from there, and how we kind of see these kind of issues through the character's eyes. So yeah, we'll see.